Kelly's hand slipped on the steering wheel, slick with blood from where Michael had slammed her against the corner of the marble countertop. The engine roared to life on the third try, her foot pumping the gas pedal too hard, too frantic. Kelly! Kelly! Michael's silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by the kitchen light she'd never turn off again. His fists slammed against the doorframe hard enough that she heard the crack of splitting wood even through the closed car window. She threw the gear into reverse. The tires shrieked against the driveway. Her vision swam. Concussion, maybe, from when her head hit the floor, but she couldn't stop. Stopping meant going back. Going back meant she wouldn't survive the night. The familiar streets of her neighborhood blurred into unfamiliar ones. Left turn, right turn, straight through an intersection she didn't recognize. The empty phone mount on the dashboard mocked her. She'd hurled the device out the window 2 miles back, Michael's face still glowing on the lock screen as it shattered against the pavement. The city transformed around her. Manicured lawns gave way to cracked sidewalks. Streetlights flickered, then disappeared entirely. Kelly's car sputtered, nearly empty, the gauge screaming red, and she coasted into a forgotten industrial district where warehouses loomed like sleeping giants. Then she saw it. Between 2 condemned buildings, a bar glowed with amber warmth that seemed impossible in this dead part of the city. The neon sign flickered. The crimson veil. Kelly's trembling fingers found the door handle. Her whole body shook, but she forced herself to move. This was her only chance. Before we continue, let us know in the comment section what time it is and where you are watching from. And remember to like and subscribe because tomorrow I have saved something extra special for you, and I don't want you to miss it. Now, let's continue. The door was heavier than it looked. Kelly had to lean her full weight against it, and when it finally gave way, she nearly collapsed across the threshold. The warmth hit her first, thick and honeyed, so different from the biting October wind that it felt like stepping into another world entirely. The bar stretched before her in shades of burgundy and gold. Dark wood panels climbed the walls, and Edison bulbs dangled from brass fixtures, casting pools of amber light that made everything look softer than it should. A few patrons occupied the shadowed corners, shapes more than people, their conversations hushed and private. No one looked up when she entered. No one ever looked up in places like this. Except him. The man behind the bar stood perfectly still, a crystal tumbler suspended in his hand mid-polish. Platinum hair fell past his shoulders, so pale it seemed to glow against the black silk of his shirt. His face held the kind of beauty that didn't belong in dive bars at the edge of nowhere. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth carved with precision, skin like moonlight on snow. But it was his eyes that stopped Kelly's ragged breathing. Gray-blue and ancient, they swept over her with an assessment that felt less like judgment and more like recognition. He saw the gash above her temple, the purple bruise blooming along her jaw, the way her torn blouse revealed the handprint darkening on her collarbone. He saw all of it, and his expression didn't change. He simply set down the glass and reached beneath the bar. Kelly's body tensed. Every instinct Michael had burned into her screaming danger. Men who moved that deliberately always had something to hide. Always wanted something in return. But Augustus Orion, though she didn't know his name yet, produced only a clean white towel and a bottle of whiskey. He poured 2 fingers into the tumbler with movements too fluid to be entirely human, then slid both across the polished mahogany. "Corner booth," he said, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't place. Old world, maybe. European. Something that belonged in candlelit castles, not forgotten industrial districts. No one will bother you there. Kelly's fingers closed around the glass. The crystal was warm, as if it had been waiting for her. She should ask questions. Should demand to know what kind of bar operated in this ghost of a neighborhood, What kind of man appeared from nowhere with expensive whiskey and eyes that had seen too much? Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." Augustus inclined his head, a gesture so slight it was almost imperceptible. Then he returned to polishing glasses, giving her the gift of being invisible while still being watched over. Protected without being possessed. Kelly sank into the corner booth, her back against the wall the way Michael had taught her. Always know your exits, always see who's coming, and brought the whiskey to her lips. It burned going down, but it was the good kind of burn. The kind that reminded her she was still alive. Across the bar, Augustus moved like water, serving drinks to patrons who melted from the shadows only to vanish again. But his attention never fully left her. She felt it like a physical presence, a warmth that had nothing to do with the amber lighting or the aged whiskey. Something was different about him. Something that should terrify her. The way he moved, the weight of his gaze, the sense that he could snap her in half without breaking a sweat. But Kelly had lived with terror for 7 years. She knew what it tasted like, how it coiled in your stomach and made every breath an effort. This wasn't that. This was something else entirely. Kelly woke to velvet. Her fingers dug into fabric softer than anything she'd touched in years, and for one blissful moment, she forgot. Forgot the blood. Forgot Michael's fists. Forgot the desperate drive through rain-soaked streets that ended at a bar she shouldn't have survived finding. Then her eyes opened, and panic slammed into her chest like a physical blow. This wasn't the corner booth. This was a bed, a massive four-poster draped in burgundy curtains that pooled on hardwood floors. Morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space that belonged in a museum, not above a dive bar. Antique furniture carved from dark wood lined the walls. Oil paintings in gilded frames depicted landscapes she didn't recognize, rolling hills under strange moons, castles perched on impossible cliffs. A Persian rug sprawled beneath her bare feet, intricate patterns worn soft by centuries of footsteps. Her bare feet. Kelly's breath caught. Someone had removed her shoes. Her torn blouse had been replaced with a white linen shirt that hung past her knees, the fabric crisp and clean against her bruised skin. Someone had undressed her. The room tilted. She scrambled off the bed, her legs unsteady, and grabbed the nearest weapon she could find, a brass candlestick from the nightstand. Heavy. Solid. It would crack a skull if she swung hard enough. Michael used to move her when she passed out drunk. Used to change her clothes and tuck her in like she was a doll, something to be arranged and controlled. She'd wake up in nightgowns she didn't remember putting on, her body scrubbed clean of whatever evidence he wanted erased. The door stood across the room, 10 feet away. Kelly's grip tightened on the candlestick. She crossed the space in 3 strides and grabbed the handle, already knowing what she'd find. Locked. Of course it was locked. She'd traded one prison for another, hadn't she? Traded Michael's suburban house for a vampire's lair, because that's what Augustus was, wasn't it? No human moved like that. No human had eyes that old. The handle turned. Kelly froze. The door swung open under her hand, revealing a hallway lined with more antiques, more paintings, more evidence of wealth accumulated over lifetimes. At the end of the hall, a staircase descended into shadows. Unlocked. You're awake. Kelly spun, candlestick raised. Augustus stood in the doorway of what looked like a study, a leather-bound book in one hand. He hadn't changed, still wore the black silk shirt from last night, hair pulled back in the same way. But in the daylight streaming through the windows, his pale skin seemed even more unnatural. Luminescent. Like he was lit from within by something that had nothing to do with sunshine. He glanced at the candlestick. That's 18th century French. If you're going to hit me with it, please aim for the head. It's sturdier than the base. Kelly's arm didn't lower. What did you do to me? You fell asleep in the booth around 3 in the morning. I carried you upstairs. His voice remained calm, matter of fact, like this was a perfectly reasonable explanation. Your clothes were filthy and torn. I left clean ones on the chair. You changed yourself. I don't remember. You were half-conscious, walking but not entirely aware. Augustus closed the book with a soft thud. The whiskey was stronger than you're used to, and your body was in shock. You needed rest more than you needed consciousness. Kelly's grip on the candlestick wavered. She didn't remember changing. Didn't remember anything after the third glass of whiskey and the way the amber light had blurred into something warm and safe. The door, she said, hating how her voice shook. It's unlocked. Of course it is. Augustus tilted his head, genuine confusion crossing his features. Why would I lock you in? Because that's what men do. Kelly's throat closed. She forced the words out anyway. They take what they want and make sure you can't leave. Something flickered in Augustus's ancient eyes. Not pity. Something darker. Something that looked like recognition born from witnessing too many centuries of the same cruelty. The door is unlocked, he repeated, softer this time. You may leave whenever you wish. Walk down those stairs out through the bar and disappear. I won't follow. I won't stop you. He paused, holding her gaze. But we both know you have nowhere else to go. The truth of it hit Kelly like ice water. No phone. No money. No friends who hadn't slowly been cut away by Michael's jealous control. Her parents were 3 states away, and calling them meant leading Michael straight to their door. She had nothing. She was nothing. Augustus must have seen it in her face, the moment the fight drained out of her and left only exhaustion. He stepped back into the study, giving her space, giving her the illusion of choice even though they both knew she'd already lost. There's coffee in the kitchen, he said, and a first aid kit in the bathroom. Your wounds should be cleaned properly. Then he closed the door, leaving Kelly alone in the hallway with an unlocked exit and nowhere to run. Kelly spent 3 days learning the rhythm of the Crimson Veil. Augustus kept strange hours. The bar opened at dusk and closed near dawn, which should have seemed odd, but somehow felt natural in this forgotten corner of the city. She helped where she could, wiping down tables and restocking bottles, anything to justify the sanctuary he'd given her without asking for payment. She was polishing wine glasses when the door slammed open with enough force to crack the frame. 2 men filled the entrance, their bulk blocking the amber light from the street. The larger one, barrel-chested with a shaved head, scanned the room with cold efficiency. His companion was leaner, all wiry muscle and nervous energy, a silver chain glinting at his neck. Kelly Brennan, the bald one said, his voice flat. Your husband wants you home. The glass slipped from Kelly's fingers and shattered against the floor. Augustus appeared from the back room with impossible speed, suddenly standing between her and the men. He hadn't been there a moment ago. She would have seen him move, but now he stood perfectly still, his pale hands resting casually on the bar top. The lady isn't interested, Augustus said, his accent thickening with something ancient and dangerous. The bald man, Derek, Michael must have called him, laughed. We're not asking, pretty boy. Michael pays good money, and we don't leave without her. Polly, the wiry one, moved first. He lunged past Augustus, reaching for Kelly with hands that had clearly grabbed women before. Augustus's arm shot out, catching Polly's wrist mid-grab. The crack echoed through the bar like a gunshot. Polly screamed and crumpled, clutching his arm at an angle that made Kelly's stomach turn. Derek charged with a roar, pulling something from his jacket, a knife, the blade catching the amber light. He was fast for his size, trained maybe, but Augustus moved like liquid shadow. One moment Derek was lunging forward, The next he was airborne, his body slamming into the far wall with enough force to send bottles crashing from their shelves. The entire encounter lasted less than 5 seconds. Augustus stood in the center of the bar, not even breathing hard, while Derek groaned in the wreckage and Polly whimpered on the floor. But it was Augustus's eyes that made Kelly's breath catch. They had changed. Still gray-blue, but now they held flecks of something else. Something that glowed with predatory intensity. "Leave," Augustus said quietly, and the single word carried more menace than any of Michael's screaming ever had. "Tell your employer that Kelly is under my protection. If he sends anyone else, they won't walk away." Derek struggled to his feet, half dragging Polly toward the exit. Blood trickled from his split lip, but his eyes held genuine fear. "You don't know who you're dealing with, man. Michael Brennan has connections." "And I," Augustus interrupted, his voice dropping to something that resonated in Kelly's bones, "have had centuries to cultivate mine. Consider this your only warning." They fled. The door swung shut behind them, and silence crashed back into the bar. Augustus turned to face Kelly, and she saw it now, saw the truth in his impossible speed, his luminescent skin. The way he'd moved like gravity didn't quite apply to him. "You're not human," Kelly whispered. Augustus's expression softened, the predatory gleam fading from his eyes. "No," he said simply. "I'm not." The morning after Derek and Polly limped away, Kelly found Augustus in the loft's kitchen, standing before an elaborate espresso machine that looked older than her grandmother. Steam hissed from brass valves as he worked the levers with practiced precision, though she'd never seen him drink anything but wine. "You don't have to make coffee for me," Kelly said from the doorway, still wearing the oversized linen shirt she'd slept in. "I know." Augustus didn't turn around, his pale hands moving through the ritual with quiet grace. "But you've been drinking instant from packets, and that's a crime I cannot overlook." He pulled a demitasse cup from beneath the spout, the espresso flowing dark and rich. "Cream or sugar?" "Black." She moved into the kitchen, drawn by the smell. "How long have you had that thing?" "Since 1952. Milan." He poured the espresso into a proper cup and handed it to her, their fingers nearly touching. "I watched them build the first ones. Seemed like magic at the time, pressure and heat creating something that could wake the dead." A pause, then a slight smile. Poor choice of words. Kelly took a sip and nearly groaned. It was perfect, bold without being bitter, with notes of chocolate and something she couldn't name. "This is incredible. The beans are from a small farm in Ethiopia. They shipped them to me directly." Augustus leaned against the counter, watching her with those ancient eyes. "The loft has everything you need. Books in the study, clothes in the wardrobe that should fit well enough. The second bedroom is yours if you prefer more privacy than the main room offers." "You're giving me a bedroom." Kelly's grip tightened on the cup. "Why?" "Because you need space that belongs to you. Space where no one, including me, enters without permission." He tilted his head, studying her. "Michael never gave you that, did he? A room with a lock that only you controlled." The accuracy of it stole her breath. He said married people didn't need locked doors. Said privacy was just another word for secrets. "Privacy is autonomy." Augustus's voice carried weight that came from more than just conviction. "I learned that lesson in 1847 in a manor house outside Prague. I had claimed the estate, filled it with people who owed me debts and loyalty. I told myself I was building something, a court, a family. But I had confused possession with protection." Kelly sank into one of the kitchen chairs, cradling her coffee. "What happened?" "A young woman named Katerina. She had nowhere else to go, so she stayed in my house, served at my table, smiled when I entered rooms." Augustus's gaze drifted toward the window, seeing something centuries away. I never asked what she wanted because I assumed shelter was enough. Assumed saving her from poverty meant she owed me gratitude. Then one night she tried to leave, and I stopped her, not with force, but with words. Reminded her of everything I'd given her. Made her feel guilty for wanting freedom. Did she stay?
She did.
For 3 more years. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Then one morning I woke to find her room empty. She'd taken nothing, not the dresses I'd bought her, not the jewelry, not even a coat for the winter cold. Just vanished into the night like smoke, because staying had become another kind of prison she couldn't bear. The silence stretched between them, heavy with old grief. Kelly set down her cup, her hands trembling slightly. You think I'm like her?
No.
Augustus finally looked at her, and his eyes held something raw. I think I was like Michael. Different methods. Perhaps I never raised a hand to anyone in that house. But control is control, whether it comes with fists or with kindness that demands repayment. Power without compassion is tyranny, and I spent decades learning that lesson too late to save the people who needed to hear it. Kelly stood and walked to the window, looking down at the bar below. The morning light made everything look less magical, more real. So this, the loft, the clothes, the coffee, you're not expecting anything? I expect you to heal, to breathe without checking over your shoulder, to remember what it feels like to make choices that are entirely your own. Augustus moved beside her, careful to maintain distance. And when you're ready, if you decide to walk away, I'll give you enough money to start over anywhere you choose. No strings, no debts. Kelly's reflection stared back at her from the window, and for the first time in 7 years, she didn't see Michael's wife. She saw someone else beginning to emerge, someone who might learn to be whole again. Thank you, she whispered. Augustus inclined his head. Drink your coffee before it gets cold. That would be the real tragedy. Kelly found the phone on Augustus's desk by accident. She'd been looking for a book he'd mentioned, something about medieval history, when her elbow knocked a leather portfolio to the floor. Papers scattered across the Persian rug, and among them, a burner phone with its screen still glowing. The last text message was time-stamped 20 minutes ago. She's still at the bar. Crimson Vale, Industrial District. Owner's protective, but he's just one man. Kelly's hands went numb. She scrolled up, her breath coming faster with each message. Weeks of carefully worded breadcrumbs, each one giving Michael just enough information to keep him hunting. Just enough to keep him close. You're awake early. Augustus stood in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He saw the phone in her grip, saw the papers scattered across the floor, and his expression didn't change. No guilt. No surprise. Just that ancient, steady gaze that suddenly felt like a stranger's. How long? Kelly's voice cracked. How long have you been telling him where I am? Augustus set down the coffee cups with deliberate care. Since the second night you were here. The admission hit her like a physical blow. Kelly stumbled back, the phone clattering to the desk. You've been using me. This whole time, the coffee, the conversations, the unlocked door, it was all just to keep me here so you could what? Trap Michael? Yes. No hesitation. No pretty lies to soften it. Augustus moved into the study, his movements as fluid as ever, and Kelly hated that even now, even with betrayal burning in her chest, some part of her still found him beautiful. Still felt safe in his presence. Michael needs to be dealt with permanently. Men like him don't stop. They escalate. If you run, he'll find you. If you hide, he'll hunt you. The only way you're ever truly free is if he's neutralized. Neutralize. Kelly's laugh came out bitter. You mean killed. I mean broken. Augustus's eyes held that predatory gleam again, the one that reminded her he was something other. Something dangerous. Michael's power comes from control, from making you believe you're helpless. But if I simply kill him, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have escaped on your own. Wondering if you traded one monster for another. I trusted you. The words tore out of Kelly's throat. I actually thought you were different. That you saw me as a person instead of a tool. Something flickered across Augustus's face. Pain, maybe. Regret. I do see you, Kelly. That's why I'm doing this. Because you deserve a life where you don't spend every moment looking over your shoulder. Where you don't wake up in the middle of the night terrified that he's found you. By using me as bait? By making decisions about my life without telling me? Kelly grabbed the phone and threw it at him. Augustus caught it effortlessly, his supernatural speed making the gesture look almost lazy. You're just like him. You think you know what's best for me. You think your protection gives you the right to. It doesn't. Augustus's voice cut through her rage with quiet intensity. You're absolutely right. I should have told you from the beginning. Should have given you the choice to be part of this plan or walk away. He set the phone down on the desk, between them like an offering. But I've lived long enough to know that sometimes the kindest thing is to carry the weight of decisions others shouldn't have to make. That's not kindness. Kelly's voice dropped to something cold and final. That's control. And I've had enough of that to last a lifetime. She turned and walked out of the study, leaving Augustus standing alone among the scattered papers and the coffee growing cold in its cups. Kelly moved through the loft like a ghost for the next week, present but absent. She took the second bedroom Augustus had offered, the one with the lock on the inside that she used every night. During the day, she read books from his collection without asking which ones he'd recommend. She made her own coffee, drank it alone, and washed the cup before he could offer to do it for her. Augustus gave her space. He stopped appearing in doorways with carefully brewed espresso. Stopped sharing stories about centuries past. When they passed each other in the hallway, he'd nod once and continue on, respecting the walls she'd built between them, even though they both knew she had nowhere else to go. But Kelly felt his protection like a physical presence. The way he'd positioned himself between her and the loft's entrance whenever footsteps echoed on the stairs below. The way the bar's security had quietly tripled, more cameras, reinforced locks, men who moved with the same liquid grace as Augustus standing watch at strategic points. She hated that she noticed. Hated that some traitorous part of her still felt safer knowing he was there. The first brick came through the bar's front window on a Tuesday night. Kelly was upstairs reading when she heard the crash, followed by Augustus's controlled fury as he surveyed the damage. She didn't go down to look. It wasn't her problem anymore. The second incident was worse. A group of men, not Derek and Polly, but cut from the same cloth, cornered two of the bar's regulars in the alley behind the building. Augustus intervened before any real damage was done, but Kelly heard the commotion from her window. Heard him speaking in that low, dangerous voice that made grown men reconsider their life choices. "Tell Michael Brennan," Augustus said, loud enough that his words carried up to the loft, "that vandalism is the tactic of cowards. If he wants his wife back, he can come claim her himself." Kelly's stomach twisted. Augustus was still baiting the trap. Still using her as the lure. Even now, even after she'd made it clear she wanted nothing to do with his plans. The third night, spray paint appeared across the bar's brick exterior. "Return what's mine." Kelly stood at her bedroom window, staring down at the words, and felt something cold settle in her chest. Michael wasn't going to stop. Augustus had been right about that, at least. Men like Michael didn't accept loss. They escalated until they won, or until something broke them completely. She heard Augustus moving through the loft, his footsteps deliberately heavy so she'd know where he was, giving her the courtesy of awareness he'd failed to give her before. He stopped outside her door, but didn't knock. "I'm having the wall repainted in the morning," he said quietly, his voice muffled by the wood between them. "The regulars are being offered alternative arrangements until this is resolved. I won't let him hurt anyone else trying to get to you." Kelly pressed her palm against the door, feeling the solid weight of it. "You should have just let me leave." "I know." A pause, long enough that she thought he'd walked away. Then, "But I couldn't." His footsteps retreated down the hall, and Kelly sank onto her bed, staring at the lock she'd engaged the moment she'd entered the room. She was still a prisoner, still trapped between two men making decisions about her future, one who wanted to own her, and one who wanted to save her. Neither had bothered to ask what she wanted. The knock came at midnight, soft enough that Kelly could have pretended not to hear it. She'd been lying awake anyway, watching shadows from the street lights crawl across her ceiling, thinking about Michael's words spray-painted on brick. "Return what's mine." "Kelly." Augustus's voice carried through the door. "May I speak with you?" "Please." The please undid something in her. Kelly sat up, pulled a cardigan over her nightshirt, and unlocked the door. Augustus stood in the hallway still dressed in his black silk shirt, looking exactly as he had a century ago, would look a century from now. Unchanging. Eternal. Alone. "I owe you the truth," he said. "Not the convenient version. The whole of it." Kelly leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I'm listening. I became what I am in 1653. The transformation itself isn't important. Plague, desperation, a maker who abandoned me the moment I woke with fangs." Augustus's gaze drifted past her, seeing something centuries away. "What matters is what came after. I spent decades learning that immortality, without purpose, is just an extended death. So, I built something. A court, they called it. Other vampires who'd lost their way, who needed structure and protection. You became king. I became a tyrant dressed in velvet." His mouth twisted. "I told myself I was different because I didn't rule through fear. I gave them choice, serve willingly or leave. But every choice I offered came wrapped in obligation. Stay and owe me loyalty. Leave and lose my protection. I built a kingdom on gratitude, which is just another kind of chain." Kelly uncrossed her arms. "What changed?" "Amelia." The name came out like a prayer. She was human. A widow whose husband had left her penniless in 1749 Paris. She came to me because she'd heard vampires paid well for blood donors, and she was desperate enough to sell what she had left. Augustus moved to the window, his pale reflection ghostly in the glass. "I fell in love with her. Not the dramatic, possessive kind, but the quiet kind. The kind where you memorize how someone takes their tea and which books make them smile." "Did she love you back?" "I thought so. She stayed for 3 years, and I convinced myself it was choice." His hands curled against the window frame. "Then a man from her past found her. Someone who'd harmed her before. He came to my estate making threats, and I waited. Waited for Amelia to ask for my help because I believed she should fight her own battles. That intervening without permission would make me like every other man who'd controlled her." Kelly's throat tightened. "Augustus. He killed her." The words fell flat and final. "Broke into her rooms while I was away on court business. By the time I returned, she'd been dead for hours. And do you know what I found in her diary?" He turned to face Kelly, and his ancient eyes held raw grief that 2 centuries hadn't dulled. Pages of her writing about how she was afraid to ask for help. Afraid that needing rescue would prove she was weak. That I'd see her as a burden rather than... His voice cracked. rather than someone worth saving. Kelly's eyes burned. That's why you didn't ask me. Why you just made the plan and acted. I won't watch another woman die, because I was too principled to protect her without permission. I won't let philosophy and respect for autonomy become excuses for cowardice. Augustus took a step toward her, then stopped, respecting the distance she'd maintained. Michael will escalate until someone ends up dead. You, innocent patrons caught in his rage. I'm drawing him out because that's the only way to stop him. And yes, I'm using you as bait. Because sometimes love means carrying the weight of decisions the people we care about shouldn't have to make. You love me? Kelly whispered. I'm trying not to. His smile was sad and ancient. But I'm failing spectacularly. The window shattered inward at 2 a.m, glass raining across the loft's hardwood floor like diamonds. Kelly bolted upright in bed, her heart already racing before her mind caught up to what was happening. Michael stood in her doorway, backlit by the hallway light. He'd aged in the weeks since she'd fled. New lines carved around his mouth, shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and obsessive planning. But his smile was the same. That terrible, possessive smile that said he'd won. Hello, sweetheart. His voice was soft, almost gentle. The tone he used right before things got bad. Did you really think some bartender could keep you from me? Kelly's hand moved toward her nightstand, toward the phone Augustus had insisted she keep charged. Michael crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed her wrist, his grip crushing. Familiar. We're going home, he said. You've had your little adventure. Made your point. But this ends now. Something inside Kelly shifted. She looked at Michael, really looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see the man who'd shaped 7 years of her life. She saw a stranger, someone small and desperate, whose power had only ever existed because she'd been too broken to see through it. No. The word came out steady.
Clear.
Michael's grip tightened. What did you say? I said no. Kelly wrenched her arm free with strength she didn't know she possessed. I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm not your wife anymore. I'm not your anything. You don't get to decide that. I do. Kelly stood, and Michael actually stepped back. I decide.
Not you.
Not ever again. Michael's face twisted into something ugly. He lunged forward, hands reaching for her throat the way they had that last night in their kitchen. But he never made contact. Augustus materialized between them, his hand locked around Michael's wrist with inhuman strength. Michael struggled, his face reddening with effort, but he might as well have been fighting marble. Let me go.
No.
Augustus's voice resonated with centuries of authority. You're going to stand here. You're going to be silent. And you're going to listen to what Kelly has to say. His eyes met Kelly's over Michael's shoulder. If you still want to say it. Kelly's legs trembled, but she forced herself to step closer. To look Michael in the face while Augustus held him frozen, forced him to see her as something other than property for the first time in their marriage. You made me afraid of everything, Kelly said. Afraid of locked doors and raised voices and making the wrong dinner. Afraid of having opinions or friends or space that was mine. You spent 7 years convincing me I was nothing without you. Her voice strengthened. But you were wrong. I'm not nothing. I never was. I was just so busy surviving you that I forgot how to live. Michael's eyes darted between her and Augustus, calculating. This freak has brainwashed you. He gave me coffee and space and time to remember who I was before you broke me into pieces. Kelly's hands clenched at her sides. And now I'm done. Done being afraid. Done letting you live in my head. You're just a man, Michael. A cruel, small man who hurts people because it's the only way you know how to feel powerful. You're mine. I'm not. Kelly turned away from him, the gesture more final than any words. I never was. She heard Michael's rage crack into something desperate, heard him struggle against Augustus's grip, his curses dissolving into pleading, then into threats, then into the pathetic whimpering of a man watching his control evaporate. Augustus spoke quietly. Leave the city.
Tonight.
If you come back, if you so much as think Kelly's name, I will find you. And what I am capable of makes your worst nightmares look like fairy tales. He released Michael's wrist. Go. Michael stumbled toward the broken window, his face pale with genuine terror. He looked back once, seeking the woman who used to flinch at his voice. Kelly stared back unmoved. Then Michael was gone, disappearing into the night like the ghost he'd always been. The police came 3 days later to take Kelly's statement. Michael had turned himself in that same night, driving straight to the station and confessing to years of domestic violence with the hollow-eyed conviction of a man who'd seen something that broke him. The restraining order was processed within hours. Divorce papers followed within the week. Kelly signed them in Augustus's study, her hand steady, while morning light streamed through the windows and made the ink shine wet on the page. It's done, she said, setting down the pen. Augustus stood by the bookshelf, giving her space even now. How do you feel? Light. Kelly flexed her fingers, watching the way sunlight caught on her skin. Like I could float away if I wasn't careful. Then it's time. Augustus crossed to his desk and withdrew an envelope, the paper heavy and expensive. Inside are account numbers, passwords, contact information for people who owe me favors in a dozen countries. Enough money to start over anywhere you choose. Paris, Tokyo, a small town in Montana where no one asks questions. You could be anyone, do anything. Kelly took the envelope, but didn't open it. You're giving me a way out. I'm giving you a choice. Augustus's ancient eyes held something raw and honest. Stay or go. Build a life here, or build one somewhere else. No obligations. No debts. Just freedom to decide what comes next. And if I stay? Then you stay because you want to. Because the Crimson Veil feels like home, not because you have nowhere else to run. He moved closer, careful not to crowd her. I can offer you partnership. A place behind the bar if you want it, or the loft if you prefer solitude. I can offer you my protection, my resources, He paused, searching for words. My companionship. But only if you choose it freely. Kelly set the envelope on the desk unopened. She walked to the window and looked down at the bar below, at the amber lights already glowing in the gathering dusk. She thought about coffee made with century-old precision, about books borrowed without asking and conversations that stretched into dawn, about the way Augustus said her name like it was something precious, not something owned. She thought about Katerina, who'd vanished because staying felt like prison, about Amelia, who died because she was afraid to ask for rescue, about the space between control and abandonment where real choice lived. I want to learn how to make drinks, Kelly said finally. The fancy ones with the bitters and the muddled herbs. I want to know why some whiskeys taste like smoke and others taste like honey. Augustus's expression shifted, hope breaking through centuries of careful composure. I can teach you. I want my own room, with a lock I control. You already have it. And I want. Kelly turned to face him fully. I want to stay. Not because I'm afraid of leaving. Not because I owe you. But because for the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be. The smile that crossed Augustus's face was sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Then welcome home. That evening, Kelly stood behind the bar wearing a black apron embroidered with the Crimson Veil's logo in burgundy thread. Augustus moved beside her like a dance partner, showing her how to measure spirits, how to shake a cocktail until the tin frosted over, how to read a customer's mood before they'd even ordered. The regulars filtered in as dusk deepened. The jazz musician who always ordered bourbon neat, the professor who preferred aged scotch, the couple who shared a bottle of wine in the corner booth. They nodded at Kelly like she'd always been there, like she belonged. "Behind you," Augustus murmured, reaching past her for the vermouth. His hand brushed her shoulder, gentle and asking nothing. Kelly smiled and stepped aside, their movements synchronized.
She poured.
He garnished. Together they created something that was neither his kingdom nor her refuge, but something entirely new. Outside, the city hummed with life and danger and possibility. Inside the crimson veil, amber light spilled across dark wood, and ancient hands worked alongside newly steady ones. Kelly caught her reflection in the mirror behind the bar, no longer hollow-eyed, no longer desperate. Just herself, finally whole, pouring drinks in a place that felt like choosing rather than surviving. She was home. If Kelly's journey from fear to freedom moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the darkness. Share this with someone who needs to remember that healing is possible, that true protection never demands surrender. And I would love to hear from you in the comments. Which moment hit you the most?